and we are organizing this hearing in collaboration with the New York NGO Committee and United States State Department, and also U.S. mission in Vienna. So welcome everybody. So this is already the second session. We did one few hours ago for different time zones. And thanks to State Department and to Global Coalition on Synthetic Drugs for inviting us, for engaging civil society. We are pretty sure that the voices from civil society will be excellent and valued in the following discussion. And first of all, I would like to give the floor also to Nazli from New York Committee. So Nazli, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mate. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Great to see so many of you. As mentioned, my name is Nazli Maksudi, and I am the chair of the New York NGO Committee on Drugs, or the NYNGOC. And just in case there are people who are less familiar, our committee is a substantive committee of the Conference of NGOs in Consultative Status with the UN, or the Congo. And we've been around since 1984, supporting civil society and engaging with the UN on international drug policy and practice, which actually means this year is our 40th birthday. So hoping to see many of you in Vienna, and we can celebrate the history of the New York NGOC then together. We, of course, represent civil society organizations under an umbrella framework and from all UN regions. And though we are global in scope, our membership is really focused on the Americas, North America, Latin America, and the Caribbean. So I'm also really pleased that the New York NGOC and the VNGOC are jointly convening this civil society hearing today, which is, of course, the second civil society hearing that we have been hosting. And of course, to be co-chairing with Mate, it's always a pleasure. Really looking forward to hearing inputs from civil society on the work of the Global Coalition to address synthetic drug threats. And we at the New York NGOC are really happy to have been supporting the US in convening their national dialogue recently. Sorry, just have some background noise.
No, kicsit egymásba.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to mention as well that we were really happy at the New York NGOC to have supported the US in convening also their national dialogue for US-based stakeholders recently. And we're looking forward to jointly holding some other initiatives with the VNGOC beyond today's hearing that will gather inputs from civil society, which we'll share a little bit about today too. So I know that we can all agree that civil society participation is really imperative to international drug policy proceedings. And it's for this reason that we're really grateful to the Global Coalition, to the US, for their efforts to ensure that civil society voices are being heard in this process. And on behalf of the committees, we really encourage the serious consideration and the adoption of inputs from civil society, as well as the continuation of this engagement. So allow me to just provide some technical details as well, just before we get started with our first speaker. So as mentioned, this is one of two hearings. It's our second and final one, accommodating different time zones. So glad that many of you could have been here at this time. We, as you can see, are recording the session, and that will be made available on various websites and disseminated online and through social media. So please be aware of that if that's relevant for you. There is also, unfortunately, no interpretation today, which means that all of the remarks and interventions should be in English, given that we don't have translation. And I hope that's manageable for everyone here. Sarah, I think, will also be sharing the agenda in the chat. If she has not already, she has, of course, she's on it. And from that agenda, you can see that we have the hearing kind of structured within three main sections, this opening and introduction piece. Then we'll go to our panel discussion, followed by some Q&A, and then we will move to the statements from the floor, which some of you will have pre-registered for in advance when you are registering to attend this event. And we'll also have an opportunity for some Q&A with our panel before moving to the remarks from the floor. Those that did not pre-register to make remarks from the floor will also have the ability to do so. I will let you know at that time when it'll be appropriate, and I'll take you through a little bit more of the technical details. We'll have a speakers list that we'll share, and you can follow along, and Sarah may want to put that in the chat as early as now, so those who have pre-registered can see that they're already on the list, but others can be added as well. So I think I will just leave it there for technical details at the moment and pass it back to Mate to get us started by introducing our first speaker. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Just before we start with some other welcoming words, I would like to highlight also that we are finalizing the consolidated report from our consolidation process. We organize different consultation process in different regions and also through global survey. So we are now finalizing the consolidated report. And the topic of synthetic drugs appear to be as very important topics in all regional consultations and also in the global survey. So it is a very relevant topic for civil society, and we are really grateful that we can be involved in this initiative together with the Global Coalition, and we will do our best to give us as best possible inputs as possible as a global platform, and also our members will contribute to the coalition. So first of all, we would like to introduce Her Excellency Ambassador Laura Holgate from U.S. Permanent Mission to the UN in Vienna. So Ambassador Holgate, the floor is yours to give some welcoming words to our participants. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mate and Nazli, and good day to everyone. I really want to thank the Vienna NGO Committee and the New York NGO Committee for hosting this forum and for inviting me to speak. I'm honored to be here and to have the opportunity to hear more from you about the challenging but crucial work you are doing in the field. It also gives me great pleasure to welcome all government representatives of the Global Coalition participating countries who are with us today. I'm especially pleased to speak with you in advance of the upcoming 67th Commission on Narcotic Drugs, its high-level segment, and the midterm review, in which synthetic drugs will be an important topic of discussion in March. The United States has always been a strong proponent of robust civil society participation in all aspects of the midterm review and the C&D. I want to begin by acknowledging the crucial role civil society plays in addressing the threat of synthetic drugs, including in making and implementing international and domestic drug policy. The expertise, grassroots connections, and tireless efforts found within civil society groups, including youth, academia, the media, and NGOs like those participating in this forum, offer invaluable contributions to the work of the Global Coalition. You are the first responders and the eyes and ears of policymakers on the ground, shining a light on the crisis we are facing, both in the United States and around the globe, where synthetic drugs have devastated communities and taken hundreds of thousands of lives. Civil society participation helps make drug policies inclusive and representative of diverse perspectives within a society. When formulating policies, it's vital to hear from various stakeholders, including affected communities, medical professionals, researchers, service providers, people who use drugs, and advocacy groups. Your expertise and experiences provide valuable insights into the complexities of drug issues, helping governments make well-informed and evidence-based decisions. By involving you, we can avoid the pitfalls of narrow-mindedness and create approaches that are responsive to the needs and concerns of all citizens. This is no less true for assessing the effectiveness and the impact of those local, regional, national, and international strategies on drug-related matters. We need civil society's unique voice in the Global Coalition and in the C&D midterm review. We need you to help us chart the path forward, and we need you to help us keep on track. We know civil society participation also fosters transparency and accountability. When citizens are actively involved, they become partners who hold governments and institutions accountable for their actions and demand answers when policies fail or harm the very communities that they are meant to protect. Additionally, we count on civil society to bridge the gap between policymakers and the communities most affected by drug-related issues. Often, policymakers lack a full understanding of the lived experiences, challenges, and needs of the people they are trying to assist. By engaging civil society organizations and community leaders, we can shape policies informed by the reality on the ground that address the specific social, economic, and cultural contexts in which drug-related problems arise. Finally, civil society participation, it promotes innovation. Through their direct engagement with affected individuals, civil society organizations often develop grassroots solutions ranging from prevention, treatment, and harm reduction initiatives to rehabilitation programs and community support networks. Governments can learn from these creative and successful approaches and expand them for the benefit of all. And although we have witnessed increasing efforts to stifle civil society voices and prevent their participation in UN meetings, the United States is resolutely committed to enabling civil society's meaningful participation in UN bodies and high-level meetings. Such participation plays an important role in addressing and responding to many global challenges, including those posed by synthetic drugs. So let me close by encouraging our government partners in the coalition to make and protect space for civil society organizations in your country and in international fora. And let me again thank you, our civil society partners, for all you do and for your many efforts in support of the Global Coalition. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Holgate, for very inspiring words. And thanks for supporting civil society in engagement, also at UN level and also in the global coalition. So, Nazli, please, the time is for panel discussion, and please introduce our first speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Mate. Thank you. And thanks from me to the ambassador as well. Always wonderful to hear from you. Yes, very exciting to move into the next part of our agenda today, which is the panel discussion. And up first, we have Brian Morales, who is the chief of the Counter-Narcotics Branch for the US Department of State, working with the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs within the Office of Global Programs and Policy. As chief of the Counter-Narcotics Branch, he oversees 2 units, drug demand reduction and drug supply reduction, focused mostly on synthetic drugs. And I know Brian has been spending a lot of time on the work within the Global Coalition to address synthetic drug threats, and we're really pleased to have him here today. It's over to you, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nazli. Thank you, Matej. And greetings, colleagues. I'm coming to you today from the National Harbor in Maryland at a civil society event. It's CADCA's annual forum. It's an NGO from the US that has thousands of participants doing community-based prevention activities and trainings. I'm here to give you a brief of the Global Coalition to Address Synthetic Drug Threats and our plans to engage civil society. It's been quite a big undertaking over the past year. And I want to thank Greg D'Alessandro, who's running the slides today, and also for joining me at the earlier session at 2 in the morning. Greg, if we could go to the next slide. We're going to start off by sharing a little bit of the background of the ministerial, which launched the coalition on the 7th of July, where we had nearly 100 countries and international organizations that participated. Amazing, not just ministries of health and security, law enforcement, interior, but also ministries of foreign affairs. When you think of all of the issues that foreign affairs ministries have, the fact that they are highlighting our issue and recognizing the challenges of synthetic drugs is really encouraging and motivating. And so there was a declaration that came out of that meeting. Following that, there was a UN General Assembly session that also took place. And once again, our Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, leading both of those events and helping launch this coalition. Now, if we can go to the next slide, I'll say that we are also, in addition to looking at high-level policy engagement, looking at the operationalization of that coalition as well. I want to also share that we have a YouTube channel where you can also see all of the recorded statements for the coalition as well. And we can go to the next slide so we can see that we have the operationalization through 3 working groups. And those 3 working groups cover the themes or the spectrum of that where we see the drug issue manifest itself in its response. First is preventing illicit manufacture and trafficking of synthetic drugs, traditionally the supply reduction pillar. Second is detecting emerging drug threats and use patterns. That is the data collection area or pillar. And third is promoting public health interventions and services to prevent and reduce drug use and its overdose and other related harms. That is the harm reduction, treatment, and recovery pillar. If we can go to the next slide, we hosted these 3 meetings, and the conclusion was that we needed to break down into even smaller sub-working groups. So from 3 working groups, we broke down into 7 sub-working groups. So for manufacturing and trafficking, we have 2, one on manufacturing of synthetic drugs and their precursors, the second on trafficking of synthetic drugs. For the next pillar, you can go to the next slide, we have data collection, analysis, and trends, including early warning. And second, information sharing, interagency collaboration, and policy formulation. And for the third, we have preventing drug use. Second is engaging people with substance use and substance use disorders. That is the harm reduction, treatment, recovery spectrum. And then we also have addressing populations in contact with the criminal justice system. That also includes alternatives to incarceration. So these are the sub-working groups. And if we can move on, you'll see here that for each of these sub-working groups, we have co-chairs. And you can see the names of the co-chairs. We have established East and West working groups. And we have now a pattern where they meet on a monthly basis. So between sub-working groups and working groups, we have 40 co-chairs from around the world that convene governments. And yes, the meetings on a monthly basis are for governments. That this was sort of a request from several countries in order to be able to discuss some sensitive operational issues. And so these sessions have been ongoing since October. We can go to the next slide. I'll share that we also have 1,300 participants at the moment from the governments from 144 countries. And we have 11 international organizations that also participate. And you can see the names of those organizations listed to the left. And membership remains open for additional countries to join. And we have a meeting schedule that we've been following over the past months and will continue through September. In October, we began framing the issue. What are the major challenges? What does the roadmap look like? And so these are TED Talk style presentations. And you can see sort of the framing. Second, we have sharing best practices and models, identifying the intervention points. What are the deliverables that we're going to focus on? What are the commitments that countries will make? We have a midterm coalition working group meeting that's taking place March 6th and 7th, where we are looking for recommendations, ideas from the different sectors. And next, we are going to be looking at action planning and implementation. We won't just be studying the issue, we're looking at concretely what we can do and how we stimulate and energize countries to take action between April to July. We're looking at ways that we can evaluate past work at that point in August. And how do we sustain these efforts in the long term? We're only beginning April to July, but we want these initiatives to continue for years to come. In some cases, they may be brand new initiatives that we are starting. In other cases, it may be initiatives we've had from the past. And then we're looking at a first year review on the 5th of September and 6th of September so that we can then prepare for the next year of implementation. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll share with you all that we have a website, which is globalcoalition.us, where I encourage you all to check out. And you'll notice that in the sub-working group sections, you will find the recordings of all of the sessions. Anything that we do with the Global Coalition, we intend to record and to post on the website. The only part that we have not posted are the comments or the discussion period after the presentations, where the governments wanted more of a private forum. But all of the sessions are being recorded. We have created a new section for civil society, where we will be posting the recordings that we've that are receiving, like the ones from today that you're all a part of, and then other recordings as well from civil society, other content as well. We will be posting on the civil society section, so that will be growing as well. We can go to the next slide. I will share with you all that beyond governments, international organizations, and civil society, we are also looking at engaging the university sector and the private sector as well. And so we'll have parallel forums, discussions, networks and we'll also be looking for their recommendations as we move forward in the coalition's work. And now if we can move on to the final slide for today, for my presentation. I want to share specifically in terms of the engagement opportunity for civil society and how we are looking and considering a partnership in this regard. Our objective within the coalition is to obtain your experiences, your ideas, your success stories, and especially to have governments meaningfully reflect on your recommendations with the goal of operationalizing. I know we have a lot of dialogues like the one we're having today where we are listening and we are reflecting, but I really want something tangible, something concrete to come out of this dialogue. And that's why we are looking at 5 dimensions of effort. And I would invite you all, if you have additional opportunities, additional ideas and thoughts, to also share those with us. And so we're looking first to have national dialogues. We have already communicated formally in writing and also through our monthly meetings to all of the coalition countries to establish national dialogues between their governments and their civil society organizations. And the US, leading by example, hosted a national dialogue with US civil society organizations, over 100 in attendance, on the 24th of January, hosted by the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy, and our director, Rahul Gupta, was there to lead that session. Second, we have this session, the Vienna NGO Committee and New York NGO Committees, hosting the Global Civil Society Forums in 2 sessions. Again, these recordings, as well as the US dialogue, will be on our coalition website for governments to reflect on. Next, we are inviting an exchange of experiences. And so we are asking you all to contribute to the effort that VNGOC will be collecting content from you and helping share it with us so that it's not just posted on your platforms on the marketplace, but it's also posted on the Global Coalition website where the governments are regularly checking in. And we want to have those exchange of experiences through that format. We're also thinking at the discretion of co-chairs for different sub-working groups. Maybe we can have special sessions where we can also have civil society invitations as well. Beyond that, the 4th way that we are engaging and connecting is by having recommendations from civil society organizations. So we're also encouraging you all to share that content with VNGOC, and that will be shared with us. And finally, the final point of engagement is your success stories. Hearing from you what has worked, studies you have done, outcome studies, what is happening on the ground, and ways that you have succeeded in making an impact on this very challenging issue of synthetic drugs. We look forward to collaborating with all of you, and thank you once again for this time today. Thank you so much, VNGOC, NY, NGOC as well, for your support and collaboration in this effort. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. That was so helpful, really, to bring everyone up to speed on the work of the Global Coalition to date and the different planned initiatives, including with civil society engagement. And grateful to you, Brian, for joining, not from an office, but from the margins of the conference while you're outside. And your commitment to the Global Coalition is clearly apparent, so we really appreciate that. Mate, please introduce our next panelist for us.
Yeah, also from my side, Brian, thank you very much for your very detailed introduction of Global Coalition's work and plans. And now we have 3 civil society speakers. So first, Myrtle Clark will join us. Myrtle is a founding director of Fields of Green for All and continues to oversee their efforts. And she's based in South Africa. So Myrtle, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mate, and how lovely to see all of our colleagues here today. Thank you so much for this opportunity to present perspectives from Sub-Saharan Africa. South Africa is no stranger to the challenges posed by synthetic drugs and its increasing threat. Working in the cannabis sector, our NGO has experienced firsthand the effects of the criminalization of drug users and the futile efforts at stemming the tide of synthetics in Africa. Our perspective is historical and twofold. First of all, the effects of prohibition and the colonial capture of our cannabis. And secondly, the effects of the infiltration of synthetic drugs amidst vast legal and regulatory uncertainty. These two perspectives are inextricably linked. This week at the New York ECOSOC Partnership Forum, it was interesting to hear the representative from Canada referring to the Sustainable Development Goals as the report card of the world. Now, we always like to bring the Sustainable Development Goals into these discussions because Fields of Green for All invites the coalition to reflect on these goals and how we can work towards their achievement by looking at the bigger picture when it comes to synthetic drugs. So we need, in order to look at the bigger picture, we need to look at our history. The prohibition of traditional herbal intoxicants began with the opium wars of the 19th century. The 20th century saw geopolitical issues increase in prohibitionist approaches to the so-called scourge of drugs. And in the 21st century, we are seeing tentative efforts to address the wrongs of the past. One cannot separate the past from the present. What would have happened if herbal drugs used by humankind for millennia had not been banned 100 years ago? Would young people use synthetic neocannabinoids if cannabis access had not been destroyed? Who would use fentanyl today if opium was available? Look back at what 100 years of prohibition did. It fueled the replacement of moderately harmful drugs with always newer, increasingly more harmful substances. Who would have thought our communities would ever be flooded with synthetic cannabis? There is a pattern here. They banned opium and we got morphine. They banned morphine and we got heroin. They banned heroin and we got fentanyl. They banned fentanyl and we got carfentanil. We people who use drugs are afraid of the next unintended consequence of these policies. But if we had to come into the present, valuable resources are being spent on keeping the original sources of synthetic drugs illegal, or at best, severely limited in access. Cannabis is an example of such, as in South Africa, we see imported synthetic neocannabinoid products being sold on the street while our rural farmers are facing increasing challenges with their herbal crop. In the US, a few months ago, the Journal of the American Medical Association published a study showing higher use of synthetic cannabinoids in states where herbal cannabis is still prohibited. This strongly suggests that the prohibition of herbal drugs unintentionally promotes synthetic drug use. Continued criminalization, victimization, and stigmatization of drug users, cultivators, and traders of herbal drugs is particularly prevalent in developing countries where moral and historic prohibition, often based in religious dogma, is the norm in these societies. We must not forget that prohibition policies originate in racist and outdated moralist movements of the past, perpetuating a system that affects the health and safety of the most vulnerable and marginalized of us the world over, particularly local communities and indigenous people. This repression also affects grassroots activists and collectives, the very same people who are formulating and experimenting with sustainable drug policy alternatives for the future of all. Prohibition and stigma keep these activist organizations with little funding, censoring and uprooting the possibilities for future change. Continued criminalization also threatens the valuable cultures and traditional knowledge of local communities working with cannabis, coca, opium, fungi, kratom, ibogaine, to name but a few, in both rural and urban areas. But we don't want to get stuck in the past or stuck in the present for that matter, and we need to also look forward to the future. We know everything about herbal drugs. By making them legal, we divert users away from novel and synthetic drugs, of which we know nothing. Legalizing cannabis, coca, opium, and fungi, and their well-known derivatives, is the most efficient strategy to reduce demand for synthetic drugs. After all, as this global coalition's website states, the synthetic drugs are, and I quote, often more potent and more lethal than plant-based drugs, end quote. Let's make the safer alternatives legal. Last week, very interestingly, the Amsterdam's mayor declared, in addition to reducing stigmatization, responsible legal regulation can redirect government resources towards effective prevention, treatment, and harm reduction services. The legalization of herbal drugs with a focus on human rights and harm reduction are the only interventions that will benefit public health anywhere in the world and make most synthetic drugs simply irrelevant. Fields of Green for All, with its global partners of the Cannabis Embassy, is intent on helping resolve these complex issues by exposing the world to alternatives to prohibition that offer a sustainable future, a future where users move away from synthetic drugs as a matter of course and as a result of informed, evidence-based policies. We wouldn't be here today if herbal intoxicants had never been prohibited. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing you all in Vienna in March.
Thank you, Myrtle, for your presentation. We are moving forward to another speaker. So Nazli, please present another speaker.
Thank you, Mate, and thank you from me as well, Myrtle. Really great to hear your intervention, which of course is relevant to particularly Working Group 3 of the Global Coalition about promoting public health interventions. And I know another one of our panelists will also touch on that working group topic. But before we get to them, we'll actually be looking at Working Group 2 topic, which is about detecting emerging drug threats and use patterns. And this will be done by our colleague, Jason Eli, who is the senior expert at the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. He is an illicit drug market and policy analyst who has researched, developed, and led technical cooperation and assistance initiatives addressing illicit drugs in African and Asian geographies. Jason, the floor is yours. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Nasreen. Good morning. I appreciate this opportunity provided to me to contribute as a panelist at this consultation event. Thank you to the organizers. The rapidly expanding global synthetic drug market slowly is revealing itself to be a far greater challenge than currently perceived, one that is exacerbating the structural and political foundations of existing public health and public security institutions, capacities, and policy and program responses. While synthetic opioids, and particularly fentanyl and its analogs, have garnered a significant amount of the attention in respect to the presence of synthetics in our drug markets, in many parts of the world, this is not the case. I would like to spend my few minutes here speaking to that aspect of the issue. In doing so, and in reference to Working Groups 1 and 2, I would like to raise 3 important points, at least as I see them anyway. Let me begin. My first point. We think we know what's going on with synthetics globally, but we really don't. Illicit drugs continue to be framed through a law enforcement lens. Seizures and arrests are almost religiously used as the foundation for any external assessment on drug markets. Yet these base rumors, which ground a great deal of the global narrative around drug production and flows, are better seen instead as a measure of law enforcement presence and efficacy. Not as a proxy metric for drug production, supply volumes, presence, or use. How we report official data that we do have contains limitations also that too often we fail to acknowledge. It's prone to bias, contains irrelevant statistics, often is based on methodologically unsound collection practices, or is outright erroneous. Trisodium phosphate reported as ketamine, caffeine reported as methcathinone reported as MDMA. So-called gray market data, a category that includes CSO research reports and other non-traditional data sets, often is excluded altogether in many regional analyses. This includes the exclusion of data from NGO and community-led drug testing services, ephemeral event-based testing, and other such services screening retail drug supplies. Further, the absence of data often is equally as challenging as the presence or exclusion of data. the absence of seizures and arrests, the absence of reports, the absence of treatment cases, the absence of deaths or other recorded features. This is particularly problematic when we get beyond the surveillance cornerstones of North America, Western Europe, and Australia, and begin to look more closely at the world, or, as some have labeled it in their reports, the rest of the world. So, what do we really know about synthetics globally, holistically? By way of example, with some exceptions, the G77 nations constitute a massive black hole in knowledge around their constitutive drug markets, to the point that in the majority of nations, we don't even know the basics of their domestic drug markets. How many people use drugs? Not just inject, but use. What substances are available or being used? How are they being used? Knowledge of the synthetic drug situation in these places is a deeper challenge still. Yet, through the lens of law enforcement metrics, the absence of synthetic substance seizures in many of these places is evidence enough of an absence of synthetic drug threats in these places, when in reality is much more an indication of the presence of political apathy, law enforcement incapacity, technical incomprehension, or financial poverty, among others. If we are truly set on achieving global understanding of synthetics and the harm potential these markets possess, then core field research is needed desperately to understand the threats. Not better ARQs, country questionnaires, or ad hoc government surveys. Proper on-the-ground physical research done by local researchers working with and helping national authorities to see what is in front of them. We need to move away from the status quo dominance of law enforcement metrics on drug markets and the often skewed perspectives they may inadvertently present. And to do this, CSOs and people who use drugs in particular need to be core partners in this process of understanding. After all, who knows more about what's going on in a drug market than those whose very lives are immersed in its economy of harm? So-called national early warning surveillance and testing systems are a valuable tool, but in many places, the focus of learning must extend beyond just law enforcement seized drug samples. They must reach deep into the retail drug market itself if they are to see the warning signs they seek. In this light, we should be leveraging the expertise of universities and CSOs together to drive market-based research to improve our knowledge and understanding of what is here and what is coming. My second point, synthetics are a lucrative business solution for organized crime, particularly since COVID. Drugs are a business, and business is very good. The synthetics business is even better. Synthetics are consistently easier and cheaper to manufacture. They lack the volumetric, agricultural, and geographic constraints that traditional drugs possess, and they are more easily sourced, substituted, trafficked, and distributed. Let's look at this threat from a criminal actor's perspective. The recently released 2023 Organized Crime Index is a database that assesses organized criminality around the world through a series of illicit market metrics, one of which examines synthetic drugs. The score for each market in each country is ranked on a scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being little or no organized market and 10 representing a country that is driven by government-sponsored criminal activities. Think of a narco state, for example. In this piece of research, the global synthetic drug market's mean score was 4.62. Yes, the role of synthetic opioids skewed scores for the US, Canada, and some other developed nations, as one would expect given their circumstances, and they fell above this mean. But what about the rest of the world? Let's look at the G77 membership as an example. It covers the majority of UN member states that fall outside of the northern economic markets of Europe and North America. 58 G77 countries, or roughly 40% of the total, registered a synthetics criminality score that was also above the global mean, and many of these exceeded the global mean by a significant margin. In comparing these scores with their 2021 index scores, we see that nearly every one of the G77 members has experienced an increase in its synthetics drug market score over the past 2 years. The situation is deteriorating across the globe. In short, growing out of technological expansion and geographic extension, the threat of synthetic drugs today extends well beyond that which is proliferating in the ongoing tragedy that is the North American opioids crisis, or even synthetic opioids themselves. It incorporates a wide variety of substances from precursors and pre-precursors, both licit and illicit, to finished goods across myriad markets and through what seems like an ever-evolving network of black and gray market suppliers, chemists, and distributors. In the same way that drugs are a lucrative business for organized crime groups, it's fair to recognize also that drugs are a lucrative business for public security and law enforcement institutions the world over. The war on drugs approach undertaken by myriad agencies has been a tool to increase operation budgets, expand personnel rosters, extend surveillance capabilities, and militarize equipment inventories. And still, drug markets continue to grow, particularly the role of synthetics in those markets. Alpha PVP in Ukraine, 2CB in Southern Africa, nitazene compounds in North America, xylazine in Europe, and just last month, medetomidine in the drug supply of my city of Toronto. This brings me to my final point, the money, or lack thereof. Much of the good practice that does exist across the G77 today does so in an environment that is increasingly politically challenging amid critique that is more emotive than it is evidence-based, and with restrictive funding resources that sees any of this work struggle to endure. The heyday of convincingly spinning a drug-related project into the crosshairs of very large HIV-specific harm reduction funding envelopes held by multilateral donors like the Global Fund, World Bank, and PEPFAR is over. As many of you know, in many developing countries, these donors were the sole financial instigator for the emergence and growth of drug-related research and programming in places that otherwise it would never have happened on its own. The subsequent epidemiological and population size studies they sponsored, even though most tended to focus only on the people who inject drugs, subpopulation of people who use drugs, still provided a beginning for an understanding of the value of surveillance and testing, epidemiology, and evidence. In many countries, these exercises even brought together public health and public security entities to the same drug-themed discussion table. With unilateral funding rollbacks, these days are gone. Getting money to fund drug-related research, interventions, or other programming today is an increasingly difficult exercise, particularly for things like research or community support programming by CSOs in most of the G77. This is true not just for international donors, but also for national government budgets as well. Existing funds that are allocated to drug activities and tend to go to the same small group of usual suspects: law enforcement, security agencies, some multilateral organizations, and for the same rote list of things: law enforcement or security agency equipment, personnel training, meetings, cooperation. This is not to say that money shouldn't be allocated for these things. However, money shouldn't be allocated to only these things. If we are serious about responding to the global challenges emerging from this ongoing expansion and extension of synthetic drug markets, then, alongside an acceptance of our surveillance weaknesses and a recognition that the old ways of responding are not necessarily the best ways, we need to commit money to the cause. And this commitment must go beyond law enforcement to hold up those who can contribute to a wider understanding of what is really happening, what is really needed, and also what may be appearing on the ever-approaching horizon of synthetics. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason. Really appreciate your remarks covering a variety of issues, but all interrelated, and really highlighting where we're at, where the shortcomings and limitations are, and where we need to go. So thank you so much for those remarks. And I'll pass it to Mate to introduce our final panelists for this part of the agenda.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you, Jason, for your presentation. And our next speaker is Nicholas Boyce from Canadian Drug Policy Coalition. Nick is the Canadian Drug Policy Coalition's senior policy analyst. He has worked as a gay men's harm reduction coordinator at the AIDS Committee of Toronto, as the provincial trainer with the Ontario HIV and Substance Use Training Program, and as director of the Ontario Harm Reduction Network. So, Nicholas, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mate. Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm Nicholas Boyce with the Canadian Drug Policy Coalition, a nonpartisan organization working to advance drug policy grounded in evidence, public health, human rights, and social justice. We envision a future where people, regardless of their relationship to drugs, can access safety, autonomy, and well-being. I'm speaking today from Ottawa, the capital of Canada, which occupies a traditional unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. Canada is experiencing a drug policy crisis today because of drug laws first created more than a century ago. Laws not based on evidence of health outcomes, but designed to control and exclude Indigenous, Asian, and other racialized communities. Canada's colonial, racist, and classist drug laws influenced future international drug prohibition. If international drug control conventions aim to protect the health and welfare of humankind, then by all metrics, they have completely failed. Instead, they have worked against this, and over the last few decades, we have created an enormous unregulated drug market tied to extreme violence and corruption, trampled human rights around the world, and in North America, particularly those of Indigenous, African, Caribbean, Black, and other racialized communities, driven the stigmatization and discrimination of people who use drugs, diverted massive resources away from health, social, and environmental initiatives, and caused the diversification of new drugs and pushed drug production to new regions with significant destruction to biodiversity. While there are efforts in the global coalition to address prevention, harm reduction, and treatment, we are deeply concerned with the perpetuation of supply-side interventions. Scheduling, detection, eradication, interdiction, and other enforcement efforts will continue diverting significant resources from initiatives that more effectively reduce demand and support healthier people and communities, while accelerating an already unpredictable drug market. In Canada, over a century of prohibition has created one of the most volatile and toxic drug markets in the world, and a context for mass death. In a country of 40 million people, 22 are killed each day by toxic unregulated drugs. In 7 years, there were over 40,000 opioid-related deaths, considerably more if we include stimulants. Relentless death has inflicted trauma on first responders and harm reduction workers. There is persistent grief and loss in communities. A group called Mums Stop the Harm, mothers who have lost children to preventable drug deaths, now has over 4,000 members. Emergency responses such as overdose prevention sites, safe supply initiatives, and experiments with decriminalization have become vital responses to the toxic drug supply. Some people may look to Canada and think harm reduction, safe supply, decriminalization, it's not working. Let me be clear. Canada's novel approaches have not been implemented anywhere near the scale and pace needed to keep up with changes to the unregulated drug market. We only scaled up consumption sites in recent years after deaths started escalating, and only in a few urban areas. Most sites only allow injection drug use, yet over half of toxic drug deaths are in people smoking drugs. Just 1 year ago yesterday, the province of British Columbia piloted the decriminalization of certain drugs. Just 1 year to barely begin undoing over a century of criminalization, yet critics are already saying it has failed. You do not fix a growing housing crisis or have accessible treatment in 1 year while increasing police budgets. And critically, decriminalization does not address the toxic supply driven by prohibition. In North America, the problems of prohibition surfaced when alcohol was made illegal in the 1920s. Beer was displaced with more potent moonshine. This is what has happened with opioids. Prohibition has caused more potent opioids to replace less potent ones. Alcohol prohibition saw the rise of violent gangs taking control of the illicit market. Today, drug cartels dominate entire regions of the world. We ended alcohol prohibition. If we had sensibly regulated the production, distribution, sale, and access to other drugs, novel synthetics may not have proliferated as quickly, and violent cartels may not have flourished. Scheduling and enforcement have not stopped the flow of drugs into Canada. In fact, as we target more drugs and precursors, Canada has become an exporter of fentanyl and methamphetamine. Prohibition and criminalization are not a given. We can change course, but half measures and continued supply-side interventions will only deepen the crisis. Let us stop talking about synthetic drug threats and get honest about the threats and realities of prohibition. Last year, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights released a landmark report, Human Rights Challenges in Addressing and Countering All Aspects of the World Drug Problem. We urge the coalition to follow their recommendations and in particular act on A, adopt alternatives to criminalization, zero tolerance and elimination of drugs by considering decriminalization of usage, and take control of illegal drug markets through responsible regulation to eliminate profits from illegal trafficking, criminality and violence. C, consider developing a regulatory system for legal access to controlled substances. And K, meaningfully engage civil society organizations, people who use drugs, affected communities and youth in the design, implementation, and evaluation of drug policies to ensure that their knowledge and experiences are considered. We are pleased to see the coalition making explicit references to harm reduction and discussions about improving access to a spectrum of treatment of care. Though stress most people's drug use improves without treatment when basic needs such as housing, food, and health are addressed. We urge the coalition to not pathologize or equate all drug use with addiction. Most people use drugs without concerns. However, their risk of negative outcomes is significantly increased when using illegal, unregulated drugs. We encourage the coalition to end prohibition approaches and to form a working group to address calls for decriminalization and develop models of legal regulation. We appreciate this brief opportunity for civil society engagement and encourage all coalition members to proactively resource meaningful and sustained engagement with people who use drugs, especially those most impacted by criminalization. Futile enforcement strategies have only worsened the global drug situation. Rooted in an understanding that drug use is morally neutral, has happened for time immemorial, and that a drug-free world is impossible, we reject political polarization and envision fundamental change. A new paradigm is not simply for the health of people who use drugs, but critical for racial and social justice, gender equity, human rights, environmental protection, and the realization of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nicholas, for your intervention. And we are just on time, so we still have some time, few minutes for any questions or comments related to panel discussion. Anyone who wants to ask question or comment based on what was said in panel discussion?
Mate, I wonder if we can start with one question that I saw in the chat, which I thought was an important one for everyone to understand, and perhaps it's for you, Brian. I saw the question was really about the definition of synthetic drugs and kind of the scope, what you consider falling within the gamut of synthetic drugs, perhaps something that you could speak to and shed some light on for our attendees. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nasli. So when we're talking about synthetic drugs, we are looking at, to put it in the simplest terms, those that are produced with chemicals that aren't of plant origin. And so if it's, sitting in a field, if it's cultivated, that would be an organic or a plant-based drug, to just put it kind of crudely. I know there's might be some nuances there, but different countries have different realities and focus on different sort of substances in different ways with different definitions, but that's to put it plainly, to get us all kind of on the same page with our governments.
Thank you. We have Andrew Kolodny.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to make a comment on the presentation from Nicholas. Certainly I think Nicholas can advocate for against prohibition, but just factually, some of his comments I think are not accurate. The notion that prohibition results in more dangerous drugs is not correct. The lesson from the North American opioid crisis is that an oversupply of licit, legal prescription opioids, a massive oversupply, led to an epidemic of opioid use disorder in the United States, which in turn led to a demand for illicitly synthesized fentanyl. Fentanyl did not flood into the United States because of prohibition. Fentanyl flooded into the United States because of an epidemic of opioid use disorder. And fentanyl emerges in the United States when we were at the height of prescription opioids. Not, many people think it was when prescription opioids started to decrease that we saw fentanyl emerge. It's actually fentanyl emerged in the US in 2014. So again, I think it's certainly appropriate to advocate for prohibition if that's your view, but it's factually incorrect to say that prohibition resulted in the fentanyl problem affecting North America.
Thank you, Andrew, for your comment. Do we have
Nick
any
would like
other
to
comments?
respond.
Nicholas,
May I just respond?
Please.
We know that aggressive pharmaceutical capitalist marketing pushed pharmaceutical opioids onto people that didn't need them, overprescribing, and led to some people becoming dependent, physically dependent on those drugs. People, however, were not dying from toxic illegal drugs. The response to overprescribing was deprescribing, not addressing physical dependency, not addressing physical emotional pain. And that's when people resorted to the illegal market. And the illegal market had become flooded with fentanyl because we did not have regulated alternatives for people to move to. It was prohibition that introduced fentanyl. Maybe there was an extra demand because of the overprescribing of opioids, but they are equated. But the people who have used drugs for time immemorial, and when they use toxic drugs driven by prohibition, that's when they die.
If I could just quickly respond, I do agree with you that our response to the epidemic of opioid use disorder in the United States was not great, that we should have been doing a much better job of seeing that there was access to effective treatment for people who became addicted to prescription opioids. But again, heroin and fentanyl deaths started rising around the height of prescription opioid consumption in the United States, not during this period of de-prescribing. And by the way, we are still massively overprescribing opioids in the United States. We have the highest per capita prescription opioid consumption in the world.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other comments or questions from the floor? And otherwise, we have a list. Yes, Dr. Pamela Keituru, the floor is yours. Yes. Unmute yourself, please. We don't hear you.
Sorry. Okay. Okay. My name is Pamela Kaiduru from Kenya. I represent the International Society for Substance Use Prevention, that is ISAP Kenya. I am glad to be here. I want to make a comment on what Johnson mentioned about the bit of lack of research and funding for research, especially in Africa. I think there is need to drive research because that is what will be able to drive the interventions that are science-based or that evidence-based. I was also to acknowledge what Nicholas has spoken to, the linkage of the problem to the socio-economic development, because when people make meaning of the challenge faced by the drug issue, especially the synthetic drug issue, then they'll be able to intervene from a knowledge perspective and making meaning of the effects of the drug conditions in the nations and even at the community level. The involvement of communities and civil society is very, very important, because then we are able to get to the lowest level where the masses are suffering because of synthetic drugs. Otherwise, I want to appreciate this, and I am glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other urgent question or comment? Otherwise, we have a list of organizations which applied to give a statement. So let's start with the list. So first,
Mate, shall I
Yeah.
just give some technical details about how we'll be using the list before we go right into it? Yeah?
okay,
Thank you.
please
Thank you.
proceed.
Just to say, I briefly spoke about it at the top, but I don't think I gave all of the details that were necessary. So as Mate indicated, there is a speakers list. Sarah has put it in the chat again. These are all the individuals who registered to speak upon registration for this event. So you let us know in advance. If you are in that category, do have a look, make sure your organization is there. But if you did not indicate in advance, but you're here today and you would like to make remarks from the floor, up to 3-minute remarks, please do raise your hand. We will then be able to add you to that speakers list. And for those that are raising their hands, just know we'll lower your hands as we add you to the list. But if you find that you're missed or you weren't added to the list, just feel free to comment in the chat or to raise your hand again, and we'll make sure that you get added. And if there are some speakers that aren't here at the moment that they're called upon, we'll just move them to the end of the list, and we'll revisit an opportunity for those that were missed to make some remarks once we get through the speakers list, both pre-registered and folks that are here today. But I think that's it, Mate. I think we're good to go. So please take us away with the first speaker on our pre-registered list.
Okay, yes, so the list is quite extensive, so let's start with the Rural and Urban Aid for Youth Development Initiatives. The floor is yours, if somebody from this organization is here with us.
Yes, Femi Oyebode. So it's my pleasure. Let me first of all commend the chairman for this Vienna NGO committee for this brilliant initiative, as well as commend the effort he has been making is bringing together the civil society organization across the world. Just last year, he was able to organize a consultative meeting in Africa, held in Zambia, coordinated by our dear Sarah Pika. It was a very reasonable session that we come up with a very beautiful submission that affects especially the fortune of Africa community as a matter related to the issue of drug abuse. Now let me go to the issue that we are discussing. It is about the issue of detecting emerging drug threats and use pattern. Let me cite my country as an instance in this regard, or especially what we are facing when it comes to the issue of the emerging drugs. What are the emerging drugs? Of course, we all know that the most commonly abused drug in my country, in Nigeria, for instance, is cannabis, sativa. About 10% or about 10.6 million people of the adult population, they were reported that they have been using this cannabis sativa. And Nigeria is among the main countries globally reported on the high quantity of cannabis. In fact, on a daily basis, the organization or the agency vested with the responsibility of arresting and prosecuting drug offenders in Nigeria, we call them the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, in partnership with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, on yearly basis, you do report the pattern of drug use. But surprisingly, if you have been listening to the news in Africa, you will recall that the issue of terrorism insurgency is on the high side. Why? It is because of the use of this detecting emerging drugs. For instance, you would realize that in Nigeria, as we are talking today, that some of the youth go as far as inhaling sokoway early in the morning to make them high. And when they do this, they go on rampage. They wreak so many havoc. Just about 2 days ago, 2 traditional rulers were killed after by these terrorists, and it's on the pages of the news. Now we talk about this issue of cannabis. It is reported that cannabis use is 7 times higher among men in Nigeria, for instance. While women, in the past years, we have about 18.8% of them that are using this drug. And the age percentage among the women in Nigeria is about 34 years, while among the men, it's about 31 years. Other than this drug that we are talking about, we also have this issue of the stimulant drug that are also in the increase in our dear country. The challenge we have in this instance is that there are some drugs that are acceptable in Africa, for instance, that are regulated. But when you go to some other countries in Africa, which I will want the chair also to take note. For instance, other countries in Africa are decriminalizing cannabis sativa. But in Nigeria, the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency frown at the use of cannabis sativa. We also have these solvents, the inhalants. What do they inhale? There is this substance called Evosic or gum. They use it in marking 2 objects. Early in the morning, our youth go and sneeze this. When they inhale it, they go on rampage and wreaking havoc in the society. Let me tell you today, whether it is under report or it's even being reported, you see that a day will not pass without recording ugly incidents from the consumption of drug abuse, especially when it comes to this solvent. The other one now that is on the increase in our country is called Colo. The name is taken from Colorado. And when you see youths in Africa now talking about Onkolo, you will see a very sudden demonstration effect of drugs on them. They could go to any level. Some of them will be hitting their heads on if they see a pole, electric pole, or they see water or whatever they see around. They consume it when they are on colos. And the youth, the song they are singing in the society today is Onkolo, Onkolo, Onkolos. The moment they say somebody is on colos, you see different reactions from them. So this, no doubt, as is affecting the future of our youth. And this takes us to the issue of rehabilitation. Naturally and normally, according to the research and the effort of the UNODC, we all consider drug users as a drug-dependent person as somebody who need help, who need rehabilitation. But you find out that we have little or no, there is a little rehabilitation effort. What do I mean? Let me talk about this issue of rehabilitation services, especially as it concerns our country. Nearly 40% of high-risk drug users reported that they wanted help when they have consumed this, and maybe after the effect have left their body, you now told them that you have consumed this and you are behaving like this. They want to go back, and when you show them that this is what you have done when you are on drugs, and they will say that they will agree that they need help. But only 12% of the high drug users had received treatment for a drug problem over the course of their using drugs. A rate only slightly higher for women, 13% for women versus 12% for men. In the past 12 months, according to the statistics released by the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, only 4% of the high-risk drug users have received treatment. And the meaning of this, the implication of this is that when you move on the streets of Africa today, especially West Africa, you see drug-dependent person. They are high on the risk. They're on the streets. They have been let loose. And as a result of that, we experience what is called actions that are inherent to the issue of drug abuse among the youth, namely all these nefarious activities. So, and this barrier that we are talking about, we should urgently come together as a synergy to come together to address this challenge of having a rehabilitation center, not only rehabilitating these youth, we also reintegrate them so that they can become part and parcel and become useful in our society. I want to say that although in our organization, we have partnered the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency and the UNODC in the past to produce a document that is called the National Drug Control Master Plan, the official working document of Federal Republic of Nigeria on drug-related matters. There it coordinated the civil society approach on the use of on the effects on the drug demand reduction activities and the likes. So I want to employ the chairman as well as other members of this committee to put this issue of rehabilitation, especially as it concerns Africa, at the front burner, so that our youth could become rehabilitated and reintegrated back into the society, and we can reduce to the barest minimum the effect of drugs in the society. Thank you.
Femi, thank you very much for your extensive presentation. So we have a lot of other presenters, a lot of statements, extensive list. So please, I would like to really ask you to stick with the 3 minutes statement so we can get through the list in this 1 hour part of the session. So next on the list is Pakistan Youth Organization. Do we have somebody from Pakistan Youth Organization with us? If not, then the next on the list is Brandeis University Opioid Policy Research Collaborative. Yeah, unmute, please, Andrew, unmute yourself. Yeah, you're muted. Sorry. No, it's
Hi,
fine.
sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Dr. Andrew Kolodny. I'm the medical director for the Brandeis University Opioid Policy Research Collaborative. I'm also president of Physicians for Responsible Opioid Prescribing. I have 5 points that I'd like to make. Number one, the 80,000 fentanyl deaths in the US last year are primarily the result of an epidemic of opioid use disorder, an epidemic caused by a sharp increase in opioid prescribing. Fentanyl is flooding into the US because of demand for it from millions of Americans who became addicted to prescription opioids. Today, about 5% of the adult US population is suffering from opioid use disorder. Number two, opioid harms are not limited to diversion and abuse. Patients who take opioids exactly as prescribed can develop OUD, opioid use disorder. In the US, millions of patients became addicted. Tens of thousands have died from doctor-prescribed opioids. Number three, the rise in prescribing in the US was caused by drug company marketing disguised as advocacy for treating pain. The same pharmaceutical industry playbook is now being used to influence prescribing throughout the world, and with great success. Published reports have documented increases in prescription opioid consumption, prescription opioid addiction, and prescription opioid deaths occurring in Australia, Brazil, Israel, Sweden, Switzerland, England, France, Norway, and the Netherlands. These countries are following in North America's footsteps. It's time for the CND, UNODC, and INCB to address the overprescribing problem and more forcefully regulate opioid manufacturers and distributors, because the addiction that's caused by illicit opioids is leading to an increase in use of synthetics. Number four, the notion that opioids are our best, strongest analgesics, or that only opioids relieve severe pain, is false. Countless studies have shown that non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs that are safe enough to be sold without a prescription, can be as effective as opioids for severe pain. This means that levels of untreated pain cannot be assessed simply by measuring levels of opioid consumption. And lastly, number five, I strongly believe that tramadol, one of the most problematic synthetic drugs in low-income countries and one of the most abused drugs worldwide, remains unscheduled and not properly controlled because of pharmaceutical company influence, in particular Grunenthal, on the World Health Organization's ECDD, the Expert Committee on Drugs of Dependence. Pharmaceutical companies have lobbied the ECDD against scheduling of tramadol. And organizations funded by them as well, they've done it both directly and indirectly. They have convinced the ECDD that scheduling tramadol would worsen the problem of untreated pain. This is false. Proper international controls on tramadol do not jeopardize access to pain treatment. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, for your intervention. And the next on the list is Organization for the Fight Against Narcotics, Prohibited Drinks, Smoking, and Alcoholism, OCOS. Do we have a representative here? No. Next is Hepatitis Foundation of Ghana. No. Next on the list is Synergy des Femmes de la Société Civile. No. The next is World Children Charity Organization. Next is Bring Light, Save Life. The next one is Psycare Humanitarex Foundation. The next one is Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access. No. Forum Drugs Mediterranean. And the next one is Katka. They have a conference, but I hope somebody's here.
Sorry, Matej. I think Kenzie raised his hand for the Forum Drugs Mediterranean Fund.
Oh, okay, okay, good. Thank you. So, Kenzie, the floor is yours.
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, we just emphasizing something that put earlier in the chat. There is maybe something missing from all of these initiatives, and it's corporate accountability and the responsibility of private companies, in particular pharmaceutical, chemical companies. It's been mentioned just before their role in the fentanyl crisis, but beyond that, it seemed that pharmaceutical companies, even though they are the core of this issue, are just never invited to the table, not present. They may be present indeed in the lobby, but not at the table as such, and in particular not at the table to be asked for accountability. So that would be something interesting to add in the scope of the initiative, the coalition, I mean. And related to that, I'm also echoing what has been said earlier in one of the presentations. The same thing with the security industry. I mean, the security and the police industries are benefiting from this situation, and they are also not often asked about that, about their role, their implication, asked for accountability, and that would be interesting to contemplate. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you very much. Now, do we have somebody from Katka here? No. And as far as I know, Ahmad Shah is with us. You're from Pakistan Youth Organization. Is it correct?
No. Thank you so much.
No. Okay, which organization? We missed you.
Yes.
Huh? But you have something to say? You have statement? Oh, okay. So
I know we added him to the end of the speakers list, Matej, so maybe he's preparing to come in a few minutes as we go through the rest.
Good. I see it now. So I have a list on the paper, but I realized now that we have also online list, which is updated. Okay, so Nazli, could you take from here so that the rest of the list?
Sure, no problem. Thanks, Matej.
Thank you.
So the next organization that pre-registered to speak from the floor is Universidad CES. CES is a representative from that organization here. Yes, please go ahead. Oh, is that Ahmed? That's you chiming in. You now, Ahmed, if you're ready to go. I don't hear Universidad CES chiming in. So Ahmed, if you would like to speak now, I think we have ample time for the remaining intervention. So please go ahead. Matej, that sounds good to you.
No, thank you so much, for all the first nights. I work, mine is just a little bit, introduce my inspiration from the 6th Asian Youth Congress, Bali, Indonesia in 2008. from where I channelize my motivation activities in the field of substance use preventions and youth empowerment. So currently I'm working as a senior program assistant, Colombo plants. I'm looking one of the prestigious project, one global refugees project. Actually, I'm, when I did my research, effects of drugs on socioeconomic condition, people of Chitrals, the mostly the people, especially male and females, are using opium. Opium. So the production is there is less as compared to the consumption. In a day they are using these drugs. They are like as a smoking, also eating, also they make a syrup and different way. The majorities of drugs, opiums, come from Afghanistan. They are using females and children are using these drugs. When I meet a 6-month baby, when I am doing my survey, a 6 months baby was opium addicts. When I asked her mother how, so she told me when she, I take drugs. Actually, mother was taking drugs, opium. If she's taking, then she's feeding the child. She sleep very well throughout night. When she don't have the drugs, accordingly, she's crying throughout the day. This was the issue. And secondly, due to opium, mostly there are reported most, this is majority of the areas, one of the, I belong to the Chitral, most 80% the pupils spends on drugs, opium especially. It's very expensive. In 10 gram, it's around 1,500. Now it's much expensive. So remaining 20%, they are spending their children educations and health and all the things. So my father was also drugs addicts. Fortunately, I have been when I participated this program. Before there was no any awareness. So after there are a big organization, Akhan Development Network, on the basis of my research now. Their Akhan Development Networks, intervention in that respective area. They are, opening the treatment centers, and also they are working in preventions. Sometimes I'm working as a, in prevention sector, I'm working as a consultant, sometimes an advisor working with this area. Thank you so much. This credit goes to INLs, but now it's not that programs, the INL US funded programs. It's not changed my life. It changed my generations. Two of my nieces right now they are working in the national health sector. When I was participated in the programs, that give me awareness. Now I am creating leaders, not. No, without my presence, they are working in their respective area. Thank you so much, all the efforts you are doing. So I'm so glad. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your intervention. Happy you could join us and make remarks today. So I'll take us back to our list of pre-registered speakers. I will keep going through those. Our next one is the European Coalition for Just and Effective Drug Policies, or ENCOD. Do we have someone here from ENCOD? No, not at the moment. Okay. If there isn't anyone from ENCOD, I'll take us to our next pre-registered speaker, which is POS Foundation, POS Foundation. Is someone here from POS Foundation? No? All right. If no one's here from POS Foundation, I'll take us to our next, which is the Kuchlak Welfare Society, Baluchistan, Pakistan. Is someone here from that organization? No? Okay, I'll keep taking us through here. ASUD, Auto Support de Usager de Drogas. Certainly I did not pronounce it properly, but ASUD, I should have stuck there. Anyone here from ASUD?
Yes, hello, thanks. Thanks for trying. ASUD means the self-support of people who use drugs in French. I'm taking the slot for Farid, who is not here. I've been talking with him on the phone. He's having trouble to connect to the internet, and we didn't find the call-in numbers for this call. But I think, I know what he wanted to present on, so I can try to explain to you, but it echoes the discussion, the question you raised already, Nasli, earlier. What is synthetic? What does it mean? And I think Farid wanted to emphasize, and ASUD, the French organization of people who use drugs, wanted to emphasize the situation currently in France and Western Europe, and Europe generally, where we have what we call neocannabinoids. It's short for synthetic cannabinoid receptor agonists. So these are novel psychoactive substances that mimic the cannabinoids in the plant, but that do not exist in nature. So these are definitely synthetic drugs that exist only synthetically. And these are very difficult to categorize, and often it's difficult to talk or to address or to do harm reduction, prevention, information about these neocannabinoids because of this generic term, synthetic cannabinoids. Because consider that cannabis and cannabinoids, we have THC, CBD that are present in the plant, but we can also have synthetic THC, for instance, Marinol, which is a medicine. It's the exact same thing as the THC present in the plant, but it's obtained synthetically without plant material involved. Same thing with CBD. We have synthetic CBD, and it's exactly the same molecule, whether it's obtained from the plant or synthesized in a lab. And so this, when we say synthetic cannabinoids, it includes both the neocannabinoids, these new molecules, this NPS that we don't know any pharmacological information about, but it also includes synthetic CBD, synthetic THC, which is just another form of THC and CBD, which we know everything about, which is actually used and marketed as medicine. So this label, synthetic cannabinoids, is meaningless. And it's problematic to have meaningless labels, meaningless names, because in France, we have confusion in making information, prevention, in explaining the difference between synthetic CBD, that may be a concern for some people, but it's certainly a different concern as compared to these neocannabinoids, these new molecules just invented recently, of which we know nothing. So for cannabinoids, we have this term neocannabinoids that serves to really trigger these new compounds, these new invented NPS cannabinoids, as opposed to well-known synthetic cannabinoids, let's say. But the issue is the same for other classes, other categories of drugs. So I was giving in the chat the example of morphine. Morphine also can be derived from opium or synthesized without plant material. And if we are not able to know if we are addressing both or different, et cetera, I mean, this coalition is entirely focused around this concept of synthetic drug without a clear definition, without addressing these issues that are not peripheral, that are important because they're at the core of ongoing public health emergencies, like the spread of these neocannabinoids. And it's concerning to have these high-level initiatives not being able to really clearly figure out what they are talking about and what they are addressing. So I see Farid has just joined while I was talking on his behalf. So sorry for that, Farid. But yeah, thanks for the attention.
Thanks, Kenzie. We appreciate you stepping in for Farid and delivering his statement on his behalf, and happy that you were able to join Farid and listen in for the remainder. Thanks for being here both. So I'll take us to our next pre-registered speaker, who is from Mom Stop the Harm. Petra Schultz, I believe, is here.
Thank you, Nazali. Can you hear me?
Yeah? Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay. Sometimes my microphone is giving me trouble. Mom Stop the Harm is a network of Canadian families impacted by substance use related harms and death. We advocate for the change of failed drug policies. We provide peer support to grieving families and assist those with loved ones who are or have used substances. My own son Danny died in 2014, and he was one of the early victims of the toxic drug supply of synthetic opioids, which takes 21 lives in Canada every day. Danny was a wonderful person. He was funny, he was smart, he cared about these fellow beings, and he cared about the planet, and we miss him dearly. Our members have lost loved ones who used every day, like Danny did, those who used occasionally, and those who used only once, like the mother of a 13-year-old in my home province. Some of those at risk want and need treatment. Many don't need it, are not ready for it. All deserve to live. What we have learned is that we do not have a crisis of addiction or substance use. We have a crisis of a toxic, unregulated drug supply. And what we have seen here in Canada is that as opioid prescribing goes down, the deaths from unregulated substances go up. There is an inverse correlation. More treatment and more border control will not end the dying. Only legal regulation and non-commercial public health focus will do so. While we work towards regulation, Moms Stop the Harm supports the provision of regulated substances to people most at risk, which in Canada here we call safe supply. And as well, we support the decriminalization of people who use drugs. In regions where this is being practiced, we have pilot projects going on. We have seen very, very positive results. Not only does it save lives, it allows people to re-engage in their communities, to gain housing, employment. It is reduced crime and has an overall positive impact while also reducing healthcare costs. I know that measures like this could have saved Danny's life and can save other lives going forward. That's why Moms Stop the Harm very strongly supports measures such as provision of regulated substances and decriminalization. And thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you so much, Petra. Appreciate you bringing the perspectives of families that have been impacted by drugs and drug laws. So our next pre-registered speaker is from Moz PUD. I shouldn't probably try to say it in French if the person is here, but it's with, or not even French, and I believe it's Spanish, if I'm showing my ignorance here. Rede Nacional de Ajuda a Pessoas com Usam Drogas. Do we have someone here from Moz PUD or no? Portuguese. Thank you, Kenzie. Thank you. Okay, apologies. All right, it seems like they might not be with us at the moment, so I'll keep us moving. The next speaker, just an acronym, NCSU. I can't mess that one up too bad. NCSU, are you with us today? I heard someone unmuting. Maybe that's, oh no, they've muted again. Okay, I don't think NCSU is with us at the moment. No?
If not, then that brings us to the end of our pre-registered speakers. We have a couple speakers that indicated here by raising their hands that they would like to take the floor. So we'll now move to Chantal Lincoln. Chantal, you have the floor. Are you with us, Chantal? Maybe you're muted. Ah, okay. Maybe they dropped off momentarily. Chantal, no? Okay. If not, I will take us to another person who indicated here that they'd like to take the floor. Samuel Naibado. Are you with us, Samuel? Ah, there we are.
Hello?
Please. Yes.
Do you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we hear you. Yes.
So I just give 3 point inputs. One from the markets, innovation and distribution, and the message. I'm sorry because my English is not good. was the market for opiate drugs is becoming influence in brain and stigma.
Oh, Samuel, you've been muted somehow, but also I think your connection might not be feasible to hear you properly. Maybe you want to give it another try, but if we have a challenge with that, you can also put your statement in the chat. Please.
Hello? Yeah, I'm sorry. The market of synthetic stimulant is particularly dynamic. As consumers switch to different substances and they are considered different in terms of the use between context and culture. Synthetic stimulant are used by well-integrated young people, but they also contribute to the chronic drugs problems. I make example in Indonesian opiate punis therapy.
Maybe Samuel, if you turn your video off, that could be one last effort to see if we can get your audio quality to be understandable, just to lower your bandwidth use. Yeah. Just to lower your bandwidth use.
Indonesia, I said that too. Number 2 for 3. As a major metal supplier of synthetic drugs about a specific substance, and it's more about the pharmacologic effect of the original. For instance, it's synthetic cannabinoid. The process is possible. The damage down the product of all this category causes a wide range of harmful outcomes, such as sometimes fatal.
Sorry, Samuel, I think your connection might not be possible. You might not.
Okay.
Sorry, in and out.
I'm connection in Indonesia.
But
Okay,
Sam,
thank you.
if you do have your statement, please put it in the chat, and we can also make sure it's included as part of the materials, since you're not able to make it orally at this time. Apologies for that.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you.
All right. With apologies for that. Our last speaker who requested to take the floor during this event today is San-Ho Tree from IPS, I believe is the organization. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you. I've been working in this field for 25 years, both on the supply and demand side of the drug issue. And I finally came across a rare consensus amongst law enforcement and harm reductionists and users. It's that everyone yearns for the good old days of heroin. And that's an incredibly damning realization. And we need to stop and ask, what are we incentivizing with today's policies? In other words, show me the incentive structure today, and I'll show you what the market will look like tomorrow. We keep rewarding traffickers that switch to drugs that are more potent, easier to manufacture, and more difficult to interdict. And today, we stand at the precipice of a much more dangerous world of drug discovery, aided by artificial intelligence. You may already be familiar with how AI is being used to find new compounds that will work against currently drug-resistant strains of bacteria. That's a wonderful thing. It can sift through tens of thousands of studies that no human could possibly do and identify these valuable new compounds. However, underground chemists can also use AI to find new workarounds, to find new analogs, while law enforcement chases yesterday's precursors. It's the public that will be used as guinea pigs in the end. And these cat and mouse strategies that go after today's chemical precursors will only accelerate that process. I worry about the new universe of even more problematic substances that drug warriors will usher in tomorrow. We need to ask if the innovations of Working Group 1 is overwhelming the efforts of Working Group 2 and undermining the future work of Working Group 3 in the long run. I wanted to put that specific question and warning on the record. We must ask now what the policies we endorse today will incentivize tomorrow, and we must stop pushing people up the ladder of harm, because artificial intelligence is the express lane to the drug crises of next year and the years after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanho. Appreciate you sharing your perspective. Now, if there has been anyone that pre-registered that did not pre-register to speak but would like to speak, now would be our last call to identify yourself, to raise your hand or write in the chat or simply unmute yourself and begin your intervention. We'd love to hear from you. We have a few more minutes that we can allocate to that if there are folks interested in making additional interventions, but really appreciate the fulsome discussion so far and spirited debates as well. I think it's been welcomed, and it's always great to hear the different perspectives. Maybe last call, last chance. Okay. If we're not seeing anyone then, and no one's itching to say something else. Oh, Nicholas, please take the floor.
Yeah, I think it comes back to earlier comments made about civil society engagement. Very often in Canada, there's been tokenistic consultation with people who use drugs. We're invited into rooms and spaces and then not actually listened to. Also, many civil society organizations are deep in the weeds of the work and responding to a crisis and don't have time to do good engagement. So I would encourage policymakers to do better engagement and to fund that engagement. Particularly on the international level, I don't know how it is in other countries, but in Canada, we're not funded to do engagement at the policy level. So I'd encourage member states to value civil society's time and to resource that and to up their engagement. I know that last week there was a consultation in the US, but it was 100 people in less than, I think it was an hour and a half. That I don't think that constitutes good civil society engagement. I know there's lots of other initiatives happening, but let's try and do more holistic and engagement and sustained engagement and resource that engagement.
Thank you, Nick. We appreciate those reflections as well. Maybe this is the true last call. Anybody else would like to say something? If you haven't taken the floor, if you have but have another burning thing you'd like to say, I think we can take another minute or two here before we move on. But if there isn't, we can begin to, Mate, speak about some of the next steps for the Global Coalition Civil Society Engagement work. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Let's go into the closing. Thank you.
Sounds good. Okay, wonderful. All right, everyone. Well, before we really close today, we did want to take a moment to explain some of the next steps for civil society engagement around the Global Coalition. And I'm grateful to Brian for having kind of given a bit of a forecast or what's to come for civil society engagement. But I'll just pick up on some of the most immediate next opportunities, so folks walk away from this session knowing where are the other most pertinent and upcoming opportunities to provide civil society inputs for the Global Coalition's work. So as the next step of soliciting meaningful civil society input, the US, the NGOC, and New York NGOC are inviting civil society organizations to share written inputs, including recommendations, planned initiatives, and good practice examples, And the hope is that those can be shared by April the 30th. So after the CND, perhaps folks are quite busy in the lead up until then. So you will have some time afterwards as well, and as well as before if you manage to do so. And I think Sarah has already shared the form in the chat earlier, and maybe she can do so again if she hasn't already. But this is the online form where you can submit those first round, if you will, of written inputs focused on recommendations, planned initiatives, and good practice examples. And more information will come by email, but just to share that these inputs will be published on the VNGOC website, and also some of those inputs will be featured on the Global Coalition's website. The idea here is that these different inputs can serve as a reference for governments to individually consider different engagement opportunities and make commitments on specific initiatives. So the other piece that I'll just give a little bit of a sneak peek around as well is that there will be other phases to our written inputs collection. I think Brian showed a little bit of what's to come. This is the first phase of that, what the form that has gone live now. But one other opportunity to just note is that there could very well also be national dialogues in your countries. The US, of course, held a national dialogue, and that's come up a couple times here today. But if your country is also a member of the Global Coalition, do reach out to your member state colleagues or to find out if there is another opportunity at the national level for engagement around this work. I think those are the key pieces around next steps. Certainly happy for our US government colleagues to chime in here again if there's something you would like to say on those or elaborate on. But grateful to you all for being here and having already explained much of this as part of Brian's presentation. So I'll pass it back to you, Mate, to close us off if there's no additional comments from our US colleagues or any burning folks looking to take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So yeah, Greg, please, the floor is yours. Last moment.
Yes. Hold on, let me turn on my camera. Good morning, everyone. Just want to take an opportunity to introduce myself. I'm Greg D'Alessandro. I work with Brian Morales at the U.S. Department of State Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs. I merely wanted to express my gratitude to the Vienna NGO Committee and the New York NGO Committee for running not one, but two excellent events with civil society in the last 12 hours. I got to enjoy both of them. This one was much more enjoyable as it was in the waking hours. I would like to also thank each and every one of you for sharing your experiences, your views, and most of all, your recommendations for how the Global Coalition can better address issues arising from synthetic drugs. They're very helpful. Both sessions were recorded, and we will certainly plan to share on our website. And as Nazli just noted, we have established a mechanism for receiving your recommendations, and we would encourage you to do so. Many of your points go directly to the importance of public health interventions, prevention, treatment, recovery. And I would note that this is consistent with the approach of our current administration and has taken and is the foundation of the Global Coalition to make a more balanced approach with a focus on public health. So thank you all. We look forward to hearing more from you, and we've set up mechanisms to do so effectively. So thank you.
Thank you, Greg, very much for your final closing words, and also for all support that civil society is so strongly involved and engaged in this process. We will do our best to feed this process with our inputs as much as possible in the next months and years. And for the closing this hearing, I would like to thank all speakers first, and Vienna NGO Committee colleagues and New York NGO Committee colleagues, U.S. State Department and the Permanent Mission in Vienna, and also to all participants, not just in this session, but also in the earlier session today. So we were about more than 100 people participated in both sessions, which is great. And we hope that we could continue this excellent collaboration and engaging civil society in the process of global coalition work. So thank you very much, and see you next time, and hopefully most of you in Vienna next month. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone. Take care. Bye, all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.